Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, partnering with donors from all walks of life to improve southeastern Virginia through grants, scholarships, and leadership initiatives. Learn more at hamptonroadscf.org.
Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Can you imagine standing up at a meeting and openly introducing yourself as a racist? That's what happens at Racist Anonymous, or RA, a 12-step program designed to end racism in our lifetime. It's a tall order, but our guests today say it works. And if you think only white people are a part of the program, think again. Our guests say that we are all racist, and the first step is admitting the problem. Pastor Ron Buford, founder of RA, and two members of the movement join us to talk about this very difficult topic. Stay tuned. Another View will be right back after this news from NPR.
Discussing today's topics from an African-American perspective, this is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. I want to start today's show with a clarification of some information shared last week by our guest, CPA and tax expert Eric Pierre. When talking about the deductions for charitable contributions for the 2020 tax year, Eric neglected to tell us about the $300 charitable contribution deduction available to all as part of the CARES Act, all who have given in that case. Our Lisa Godley talked with Eric for this clarification.
What does the CARES Act allow?
The IRS announced last November 2020 a special top-line deduction for anybody that made a charitable donation to a qualified charitable organization of $300, where you don't have to itemize. If you make a $300 donation or more, you qualify for this special top-line deduction on your 2020 tax return. So I want to make sure I announce that part. Then they increased what you're able to itemize. You have to exceed your standard deduction. You can deduct up to 100% of your adjusted gross income because the CARES Act raised this limit to encourage charitable giving during this pandemic.
So I want to thank our listeners who called me after the show to say, hey, you guys missed this point. We appreciate you. And I always learn from my listeners as well as my guests. So thank you very much for that. Now, audience, I want you to take a listen to this.
I'm Daryl, and I'm a racist.
I'm Morgan, and I'm a racist.
I'm Ron, and I'm a racist.
I'm Janet, and I'm a racist.
That means that if an Arabic person gets on a plane and I automatically think terrorist.
There are a number of black people, and some of them have these weird names. And somehow I just can't remember those weird names. And I feel very bad about it.
You might want to use unique or different, because I don't think the mother would like you to say, "Your child has a weird name."
Often we don't even realize we're being racist.
I hadn't considered myself a racist coming here, but once we got into these discussions, it started me thinking, maybe there is a little bit of racism in everybody, and that I was one of them.
The reality is that the white experience in America, the black or brown experience in America are so radically different that there is no way that the person who is white could even understand what's happening to the black person, except it's starting to happen. So I think people are coming to a place of discovery.
It's a bold perspective on the issue of racism, treating it as one would treat an addiction, a 12-step program where you acknowledge you have a problem, that it's a problem beyond your ability to manage, and you turn it over to a higher power. It's called Racist Anonymous, and joining us to talk about it is the founder of RA, Pastor Ron Bruford, pastor of Sunnyvale Community United Church in Christ in Sunnyvale, California. How are you, Pastor Ron? How you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for being with us today. I appreciate that. May, who has been attending RA meetings since 2015. Hi, May. How you doing?
Very well. Thank you, Barbara.
Yeah, thank you for joining me today. And Doug, who joined RA after the murders of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. Doug, how are you today?
I'm well, Barbara. Thanks. How are you?
I'm doing great. So I want to start, Pastor Ron, I want to tell you, I saw the story of Racist Anonymous on CBS this morning. And when I saw you pop up on the screen, it automatically came to my mind, how in the world did this black man convince people to come to a meeting and admit that they're racist? How did that happen?
Well, I think in large part because the story got picked up from a local newspaper article and was run by NPR. And so I think in our local channel here and people were interested. And so we had half the people who came to the very first meeting who were members of the church, and the other half were people from the community we'd never seen.
Wow. So what made you decide that you could treat racism as you treat an addiction, and you model this after the Alcoholics Anonymous profile? So what made you decide that that was a good way to tackle racism?
Well, in one word, frustration. I think we had several things that we were trying. There are all these discussions about racism. People get together, they talk about it. And at church, we were having something like that at the denominational level. And what I found, we had these, we called them sacred conversations on race. And while they were helpful to some, for some people, they ended up leaving that meeting. The white people left that meeting feeling guilty. And a lot of the black people left that meeting feeling angry. And I thought, there has to be a better way. And just said I wasn't going to do any more of those meetings until we found a better model to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was in London for 3 years, and while there, I encountered so much less racism. But I noticed that other people around me were having experiences with racism, people from Africa, people from the Caribbean. And I thought, this is interesting, especially when I noticed that Eastern European persons were experiencing racism there. And so putting the ideas together, I thought I took a job at the Congregational Church of Sunnyvale as pastor, and they had an active AA group that met every day at noon. And I was in the meeting, essentially, because my office is right next door. And as I was listening to them, I thought, maybe the reason we can't get rid of racism is because we're all addicted. And so one thing led to another. We put it in that model, and it's been interesting. It's been working for a lot of us. It's certainly worked for me.
I think one of the things that struck me, and as I talk to people, I'm African American, you are, and as I talk to a lot of African Americans, they have the idea that African Americans aren't racist, that they can be prejudiced, but not racist because racism involves power and a power structure. I wonder how you react to that.
I understand that point of view, and I think it has lots of value because it's true that so much of racism involves power in that way. But my disagreement with it is around first of all, the idea that we don't have some power. We're not without power. And as I spoke to a group in New Orleans once, and several people there it was a largely African-American audience. And they pushed back on that point. And I said, I'll prove to you that we are equally as racist in some ways. I said, we have for years segregated ourselves within the African American community based on shade. We even had churches that were lighter than the brown paper bag churches. And that kind of thing is racism as well.
Mm. So I'm curious, May and Doug, I really want to get to you all because I want to know, and I'll start with you, May, what made you decide that RA is something I need to get involved in?
It all began with the 12-step program when I was separated from my husband and my daughter. I know something wrong within myself. So anyway, I ran into 12-step program, ran into AA, Al-Anon, and all different kinds of 12-step programs. So I worked on that, and it did help me to restore my relationships with my husband and my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So I have that kind of impressions that 12-step programs are very powerful and effective. So when Pastor Ron initiated this Racist Anonymous, I immediately jumped right in because I know that I need to continue the 12-step program. And I had no slightest idea of what it meant when I admit I am a racist. I clearly remember the first meeting. I just follow along, say, "Hi, my name is May. I am a racist." But I have no idea what that is. But I know I must be a racist. But then after 5 years of attending Racist Anonymous, I found, I am a racist, and I don't want to be. Yeah.
So, May, what did you discover? I mean, can you give us an example of something that, as you were attending these meetings and all, that you came to realize about yourself in terms of racism?
Sure. For example, I remember the first time we have a black guy in the RA, and he described how he experienced in a supermarket. And he were talking about an Asian lady dressed very well dressed and just kind of in a rude manner and rushing through the cashier. And as he described, and I thought, he's describing me. I am that Asian lady, well dressed. With regarding other the customers in line, and so it's the RA served as a mirror. I said, that's me. So starting there, wow, I became more aware when I check out. I became more aware of the people surround me, and so that's an eye-opening. Just make an example.
Wow. Doug, do you remember how you felt the first time that you stood up and said, "Hi, I'm Doug. I'm a racist"?
Yeah, I remember it vividly. I felt scared, sad, and relieved.
Relieved?
Relieved. It was something I'd been looking for. I'll tell you just very briefly how I got into RA. You asked Ron an excellent question, Pastor Ron, a minute ago. How can a black guy convince other people, and particularly white people, and I'm white, to come to a meeting where you introduce yourself, "Hi, I'm Doug, I'm a racist"? Why, I can answer that. I'd spent my whole life, adult life, I'm 68 years old, believing that I'm an anti-racist, and I am. And yet, everything I was doing, reading books, discussing books, marching, active involvement, none of it was working. It wasn't working. I found myself on the 2nd of June, 2020, few days after George Floyd was murdered in Louisville, my hometown, following another murder of a man of color, David McAtee. And in addiction language, I reached my bottom. I reached my bottom. I thought to myself, I can't do this anymore. And I was in a meeting, an Al-Anon meeting, and I read the first step. I'm powerless. I admitted I'm powerless over alcohol, and my life had become unmanageable. And I realized I had an epiphany. I realized the 12 steps, that might be the answer or an answer. And from there, I discovered Ron and RA and found myself at that first meeting. Hi, I'm Doug. I'm a racist. So in a nutshell, whatever I'd been doing for 68 years wasn't working anymore. Every time I pointed my finger at somebody else and identified them as racist, there were three fingers pointing back at me.
Wow. Can you give us an example of something that you discovered within yourself? Same question I asked May. That made you, when you said you hit rock bottom, can you tell us a specific example of that?
Well, it's just the feeling of hopelessness that I need to do something, and whatever I was doing wasn't working anymore. So I'll try this. This feels right. Based on what May said a minute ago, I know the miracle of the 12 steps. Now, I should interject, the 12-step experience is helpful with RA. It's not essential. It's not essential. Helpful, but not essential. Not
Why
required.
do you say that? Why do you say that?
Because it's a universal language. The language of the 12 steps is universal. I mean, the first members of AA 85 years ago had no experience with the 12 steps. It was new. And yet, obviously, it worked. It worked. So, however, I knew from my life in the 12 steps for 26 years, the 12 steps are very powerful. And that's when I had that epiphany. I read the first step and I realized, hey, this can work.
So both you and May had experience also through AA. Is that correct? Am I understanding you correctly?
Not I, just Al-Anon.
Just Al-Anon. Okay. Al-Anon for you. Okay. And May, you did. Yes. Pastor Ron, can you, first of all, you describe racism in a very broad way. I mean, you don't just stick to race. You also talk about gender and sexual orientation and a lot of any ways that people can show bias. Why do you use such a broad definition of racism? And the fact that you do, why use the term racist, which is so charged, as opposed to, say, bias anonymous, as an example?
Well, absolutely. And we do get that. Some people say, well, could you use another word instead of racist? And I look at it so much the way I, as a pastor or a minister, look at the question of sin. And, you know, we confess our sins on a regular basis, and we say that we're sinners. And we have the same distance we like to put between ourselves and sin, I suppose. But the truth is, no matter how we dress it up, call it bias or call it preferences or whatever, at the root is racism. It's one of the things that we as a nation have not accomplished the very first step, which is to admit that we are racist and that the institutions we've built are racist as well. And so I found it just very direct in that way. And I think the fact that the word racist disturbs us points to the fact that it is our core problem.
And you really focus on individuals as opposed to systemic racism, or as we talk about our institutions being racist and so forth. But the posture is that we have to start as an individual before we can move forward. Is that right?
That's correct. And in fact, most of the people I think in the group probably do something that deals with systemic racism by, working with Black Lives Matter or other groups that deal with systemic issues as well. But part of the system is us individually. It's kind of like Mahalia Jackson used to sing this song that everybody talking about heaven ain't going there. Well, we talk about ending racism, but yet we have people and groups that we discriminate against. And it was one of the things that troubled me at the beginning. Why is it that, you can have people dealing with issues related to, let's say, Black people who are supportive of civil rights for Black people, but yet have not embraced LGBTQ people or people who are supporters of Israel, but they don't see the rights of the Palestinians and vice versa. So we go on and we look at why is it that we, despite our activism for our own cause, have blind spots with others.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. Could you stand up in a group and admit that you are racist? I'd really love to hear your feedback on that. What do you think about using or tackling racism as an addiction, as a way of being able to take individual responsibility for it? 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Doug, you wanted to respond to the question I had asked Pastor Ron in terms of utilizing, why utilize the word racism as opposed to bias?
But you're right. It's a very charged word. It's difficult. Nobody wants to be called a racist. It's an uncomfortable word, and I think Ron's right. Pastor Ron's right. That discomfort points to a truth in me that it fits me, and the more I look at it, the more I focus on myself and my attitudes and behaviors, the more I realize it applies. Even though it's uncomfortable, even though I don't like it, the shoe fits. And my work in RA is to first get my own house in order. As I said, my default is to point my finger at others. And I'm better off keeping the focus on myself. That's how the 12 steps works.
So May, tell me what happens in a meeting. Can you describe the meeting to those who may not have had that experience, the 12-step experience?
Yes. In my experience, the first time to admit I am a racist, and then hearing most the participants acknowledge that each one of us is racist. And by the way, we open to people who are free not to mention that they are a racist. But in experience, my experience in admitting that, it's twofold that I can share. One is that when I admit I am a racist, and then hearing other people, I feel a relief that I don't have to pretend and defend I am not a racist. And so to me, admitting that is just like what Pastor Ron mentioned, that I am a sinner, period. I am a sinner. And the racist growing up in this beautiful nation called America for more than 45 years. And I feel that it is the racism cover everything. And so admitting I am a racist, but I have that sense of relief because I've been out there in the world, at the workplace, everywhere I go. I had to put on, I am good. I am a good person. And so I don't have to pretend anymore to put on a nice-looking mask. And on the second point I'd like to share is being in a Racist Anonymous meeting that is living kind of uncomfortable, practicing being comfortable with the uncomfortableness. So it's a daily reminder, I am a racist. but deep down, I don't want to. And I have to dig into what happened. And that's why racism is kind addiction to me.
Got you. Doug, so after you do the Serenity Prayer, after everyone introduces themselves, then what happens in the conversation? These meetings are an hour long, is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, generally about an hour. And they're structured the same. If you've ever been to a 12-step meeting, you'll recognize where you are. It'll feel familiar. So it begins with prayer and ends with prayer, Lord's Prayer or Serenity Prayer. There's a chair, so it's a facilitated discussion. One person speaks at a time, so we don't crosstalk. We don't address one another by name. We don't argue with one another. One person speaks their piece, and that's it, moves on to someone else. Some meetings also have speakers who might give a 10-minute, 15-minute lead. Some meetings focus on one of the steps, one of the 12 steps. So the meetings are structured all the same with variations. And they're in the spirit of the 12 steps, they're conducted in an orderly way.
Okay. And Pastor Ron, if you are not a Christian or if you do not believe in God, can you not come to the meetings?
Well, if you don't believe in God, you can use your higher power word. You don't have to be a believer in God. And I think that's one of the other things about the 12-step program that's great. It makes room for all of us in our diversity. And I think that's important. There's one other thing, though, about the 12-step model that I found unique, and I think that is really helpful for us. And Doug mentioned it. He said that we don't crosstalk. We don't argue with each other. So often, discussions about race devolve into arguments. And when I go to an RA meeting, I go to RA not to deal with other people's racism. That I may do in a Black Lives Matter meeting or some other social action meeting. I come to RA to work on my own racism. And that has made all the difference. And it makes it possible for us to discuss our own racism.
Wow. If you're just joining us, we're talking about Racist Anonymous, the 12-step program designed to eliminate racism one person at a time. My guests are Pastor Ron Buford, pastor of Sunnyvale Community United Church of Christ and founder of RA, May, who has been attending RA meetings since the beginning in 2015, and Doug, who joined RA in 2020 after the murders of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Our phones are lit up, so let's go to the phone lines. Joe, you're on the air from Williamsburg.
Good. Hello, and
Hi.
Thanks for taking my call. I wanted to take another view.
Okay.
If I can use that, if you'll permit the use of your term. In all seriousness, I have to say that I'm very troubled by this discussion, and not in a guilty way. Quite the opposite. I have felt for a very long time, and more so than ever, and especially hearing this program, that words racism, racist, in my view, are being wildly abused and expanded to the point of, I hate to use the word, but absurdity. Racism is the belief that one race is in one way or another superior to another, and racist as a word effectively can describe institutions or individuals that actually create structures or take actions that produce racist results and sort of racism put into force on the ground. I think the missing word and a more accurate description of the mindset beyond racism is a neglected word, and that word is chauvinism. We tend to associate that with males. In fact, half the audience probably had the word male pop into their head when I said the word chauvinism. But that's not what chauvinism means. Chauvinism means uncritical allegiance to one's own tribe or organization. And I think that's what we're dealing with. I think there's an awful lot of chauvinism out there, but it doesn't necessarily rise to the level of racism. And I think the fact that this word is being so widely spread, we're all sinners and we're all racists. Well, that's just setting people up for, in my view, a lot of unearned guilt. And I think the worst personal treason that a person can commit is the acceptance of unearned guilt, or the idea that the sin of racism is hereditary, like the original sin from the Garden of Eden. So, okay, I've had my say, Kathy. Thanks for listening.
Okay, I'm Barbara, but that's fine. And Joe, thanks.
That's
okay. And Joe, thanks for calling.
I listened.
That's quite all right. I want to get a response from our guest today to your point. So thank you for the call, Doug. I'm gonna turn to you first. I want to know what you think about what Joe just said.
He may be right. I'm not in the business of correcting anybody's language. If Joe feels that way, so be it. I'm following a different path, and I'm not a big book thumper, but one of the founders, Bill W. of AA, came up with the expression "contempt prior to investigation." So, what could it hurt to give it a chance rather than damn it because of its use of words or language? Joe, you may be right. I hope you would be open, or others would be open to giving it a shot. Okay. I was, and I'm glad I did.
Pastor Ron, you want to respond also?
Yes. Definitions about race and racism have been changing dramatically over the years, and it's a moving target. We'd like to see the definition of race move to the higher level, where we stop fixing it on a particular group that we're, like in America, we're very focused on black-white racism and very focused on white and Hispanic and Asian racism. But, in different societies, it's different types of things. And actually, if I was going to pick a better word, I would use the word tribal. I think in some ways, we're all tribalists. But the most important point in communication is getting to the heart of the matter. And I think the word racism makes us flinch, and we're uncomfortable with it because it chafes. It's the thing that's got us.
Okay, let's go to Buster calling from Virginia Beach. Hi, Buster. You're on the air.
Hey, how you doing?
Okay.
Hey, one of my longtime friends, about 30 years. He runs some NA and AA meetings regularly, and just to be supportive of him, I joined in just to check it out, and didn't know the rules. But for me, any therapy session, any counseling session, somebody shares something, and people give their perspective on what was shared. And what was surprising to me about this, I think it was an AA meeting that I joined in on. This first person shared what was going on with them, and I didn't know the rules, and I just said, hey, I'd really like to give you some perspective about what you just said. And they said, no, we don't do that. Like, we let people talk, and then we move on to somebody else. Like, thank you for sharing, and we move on. And I feel like that's very defeating for people. It's almost an acknowledgement of just like where you're at is okay, which it is, but you really need to be able to be open to hearing people's response to what you're sharing. And it just kind of threw me off from that whole 12-step program thing.
So you're concerned about whether or not it actually works in terms of changing people internally. Let me let my guests respond to that. Thanks so much, Buster, for the call. Pastor Ron, let me go to you first. Since you don't interact and you don't argue back and forth, as you said, and but you speak your truth, how does that help you to make change? Because you say, Pastor Ron, that you're racist.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm more convinced of it with every meeting, because, life happens during the week and you reflect on the concepts and I say, I am a racist, but I'm not a racist it's not like I'm a white sheet racist, but the seed of racism is in so much of what I end up doing, and I see it now because I focus on that. I think the advantage for us of not trying to fix other people's problems, which is the language we use in the meeting, is that it doesn't put people in a situation where often when I went to discussions about race as an African American person, it was like people looked to me to be the expert on the subject because I'm Black. And I said, I have my own issues and problems too. And I think it helps us not set ourselves up as experts on the subject and doesn't allow the meeting to devolve into individual perspectives on where they are in the process.
Mm-hmm. So I guess my question is, and Doug, I'm going to come to you for this. As you talk about your experiences or you talk about, what is bothering you at the particular time, and let's use the George Floyd trial as an example. Is that a trigger for you right now? And would that be something that you might bring up in an RA meeting? And how do you utilize that to help you to address your own issues concerning race?
It's a trigger just to when I glance at the news of the trial. Yeah, I'm triggered. And one of the things that triggers me as a privileged white cisgender man is that as difficult as it is for me to come to terms with what happened in Minneapolis, the murder of George Floyd, this is something I don't live with every day. Mm-hmm. As a person of color, as a mother or a father of a child who has to worry about what happens in the street and driving a car or buying a pack of cigarettes in the store. So that's a trigger for me. Mm-hmm. I can't ever know what that's like, but I do know that I don't have it as a white person, and that's an injustice. So does that answer your question, Barbara?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get to the whole idea, and May, you can jump in on this also. If no one is saying to you at the end of your after you express what you need to express in the meeting, is there a lesson that is taught out of that, or is the information that you're learning from the facilitator, is that what helps you to move forward, I guess? Because everybody can say what's on their mind, but how do you then work it out so that you stop having those types of feelings, or that you stop thinking in that direction? I guess I'm still trying to understand how the 12 steps work so that you can get to resolution. May, let me ask you, what do you think first?
I have been attending our Tuesday and Thursday RA group, and these two groups the dynamics very different. And the Thursday RA group have more members with a 12-step program. The Tuesday RA group, only one has a 12-step program experience. So the dynamic, I actually learned a lot about racism in the United States and anti-racism from the Tuesday group. For example, I learned the history about the slavery, and the Tuesday group, the dynamic is focused on the knowledge intellectually, less than 12 steps. And so, for example, I'm working on the book by Layla Saad. It's called Me and White Supremacy. And when I read this and I work on myself, because that's basically the 12-step program, I look at myself. So I discover and dig into myself. I have a lot of white-centering thoughts and behaviors, and at the cost of losing my own identity and culture. So I'm not sure I answer your question.
No, you did. You answered the question. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Chuck joins us from Chesapeake. Hi, Chuck. You're on the air.
Hi, Barbara. Thanks for taking my call.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, Barbara, one of your guests a while back answered the question that I was thinking. This new generation of kids, the Gen Zs and the millennials, they don't put up with that racist stuff. It's only the generation, I say maybe 28 and on up to my generation that grew up in that racist stuff, kind of keeps it going, if you will. But the new generation, my grandkids and their friends, they treat each other like they just people. They don't care about your color. And I see how the other kids interact with my grandkids. So until someone gets in, in the government to cut that cancer out that has been started from generations back, it's going to continue to go. And the Gen Z, there is hope in them.
Okay, Chuck, thanks so much for the call. Pastor Ron, you talk about the fact that the whole goal is to keep from passing racism on generation to generation.
Absolutely.
Which addresses what Chuck was talking about, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Chuck completely that we really do model this behavior in very subtle ways, even often the most progressive of us who think we aren't racist. Our children see us, and they know the ways that we are racist. I want to say one of the things I left out when I talked about the formation of RA, there was an article written, I think, through Goats and Soda, which I think is in some way associated with NPR. Mm-hmm. And the article was entitled, "Do These Genes Make Me Look Unethical?" In that article, it talked about the fact that people using unethical means like underpaid workers or unethical products, if you confront that person about the use of those products or resources, that group of people are less likely than the general population to support the cause of, say, those workers, which points to the idea that people resent being told that they're using unethical products. And that resentment causes them not to support the cause you really want to affect. And on reading that article, I thought, if that's true, the way we've gone about dealing with the problem of racism is all wrong. It would produce exactly the result we're getting these days, where people are tired of being lectured and told what to do, rather than if you put the information out there for people to get and they can come to it on their own. I think it's a more powerful way of bringing about transformation.
Are you surprised at the pushback that you're hearing from the callers today? Or is this something that you're facing as you talk about and spread the word about RA?
No, we hear it a lot. We hear it from people who say, well, I'd come, but I don't think I could come and say I'm a racist, my reaction to that is that that's because that's exactly what we need to do. It's until we can put that on and hate it about that aspect of our behavior, the world won't change.
Mm-hmm. Doug, I'm going to ask you the same question. Are you surprised at the pushback?
A little bit. And I liked the caller a few minutes ago who noted that he had sat in a 12-step meeting and wanted to offer advice. That doesn't work for me. Maybe in between meetings, I'm open to hearing from that. If I trust the person and they ask, are you open to feedback? Yeah, maybe. But during a meeting, not so. During a meeting, not so. I learn about myself best in a meeting when I'm left to share and not have others take my inventory and tell me how I could do things better. It's just, I think that's human nature. As Ron said, do these genes make me look unethical? I may have the urge to take other people's inventory during the meeting and point out their shortcomings. They don't like it, and neither do I. It works better for me if I'm left to figure things out on my own and put my own house in order myself. I'll listen to others with an open mind and an open heart. I'll share in the same spirit. And the 12 steps are a miracle. For 85 years, that's how it's worked.
So, May, I want to ask you, though, and I'm curious about this, and perhaps Doug and Ron need to be the ones to weigh in, but with everything that's been happening with the violence against the Asian American and Pacific Islander communities, I would think that you would be able to go to an RA meeting and get support from others. But if there's no interchange, I'm curious if you bring something up, how do you know that you're being supported by the rest of the group?
Wow, that's a very deep question. The support mainly, it's kind of paradoxical when everyone focuses on within ourselves, and that's the part. It's so universal. We are touching that human being, and it's in that sense, and also in a sense that we focus on our own racism, and it's a vulnerability. That's the word. Yes, that's the part I connect with each member. It's just so personal, so inner, but in a sense, so universal. In that sense, I feel very supported.
Fantastic. Let's go to Mike in Virginia Beach. Hi, Mike. You're on the air. Hello? Oh, Mike just hung up. I guess we just lost him. Pastor Ron, I know that at the end of the meeting you all hug and you come together, but people, I would assume, are sometimes in their feelings, if you will, at the end of the meeting. How are people supported past that hour?
Well, I think one of the things that happens in these meetings is that we come together and meet people in these meetings who we might not ordinarily meet. And I think that in hearing their stories, because everybody presents things from their perspective, brings us closer to those people. One of the things that I always think about in America these days is how we've become willing segregationists in terms of our close personal relationships. Sometimes I ask people, I say, when's the last time you had lunch with a person of color or had a person of color over to your house for dinner? And I'm surprised how we perpetuate our segregation in our personal lives rather than pushing the limits to go outside that. And it takes some work to do that.
Yeah. Mike is back with us from Virginia Beach. Hi, Mike. You're on the air.
Hi, Mike. Yes. I experienced travel overseas and lived in Africa and Asia. And I found it interesting that both places had racism going on. And I was just excited to hear your program today because it's a breath of fresh air. It's everybody is racist, and we just need to accept that and work on it.
Fantastic, Mike. When did you come to realize or be able to admit? Are you admitting that you're racist? Also, you said everybody.
Yes, I am.
Okay. Was there a particular moment?
Well, it's interesting because I grew up on an Indian reservation as well. And my best friend growing up was half Indian and half Native American, I should say. And so I had early experience, and So I'd say as a kid, I learned about it.
Yes, and that carries over to our adult life, does it not? Thank you
Yes,
so much for
exactly.
the call, Mike. I really appreciate it. We've only got about 4 minutes left, and I want to give each of you an opportunity to say something to the audience that you would like them to consider as we all grapple with race and racism within the country. And so, ladies first. So, May, you want to give us some parting thoughts?
I need to think about it.
Okay.
I'm slow. Okay.
All right, then let me go to Doug.
I liked that question to which May responded a minute ago. How do I know I'm supported?
Mm-hmm.
One of the great gifts I've gotten from RA is when I'm in a meeting, I know I'm not alone. I know it's obvious that here are people who are here with me in a common cause, a common pursuit to uproot my racism, their racism, and so the feeling I get is I don't have to do this by myself, and that's a great gift from the 12 Steps in RA.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Doug. We really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you so much. Don't hang up, but we're going to move on. So because the hour is almost over. Did you think about it, May?
Well, just like Doug said, I found that Racist Anonymous a great gift, a very precious gift in this. It's like a lighthouse to me. We don't have to go out to rescue boat. We be the lighthouse.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much, May, for joining us. And Pastor Ron, you have the last 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. Thanks for bringing up this topic today, too. And I think it's our behavior that is the seed-sowing thing in our society, that we all practice some form of discrimination against others based on external difference. And to the extent that we can begin, first of all, recognizing that we do that. And secondly, begin modeling a change in behavior, no matter how difficult it is, we can change the world. And one person at a time.
And Pastor Ron, you do say that people can start their own chapters. Can you briefly tell us how that happens?
First of all, if you go to something easy to remember is going to rainternational.org. If you go there, you can see how you can form a group and get in touch with us or send us an email.
Okay.
And we can get you set up for an initial meeting and the material you need, the whole script that you can walk through and do a meeting. You could do it with your 2 or 3 friends over lunch. So it's easy to do.
Absolutely. Thank you. That is Pastor Ron Buford of Sunnyvale Community Church, United Church of Christ, and the founder of RA. Thank you all so very, very much for joining us here on Another View today. I really appreciate it. Very, very powerful conversation on our show today. And I hope all of you will do some soul searching in regards to all of our own racist attitudes. If you'd like to hear this show again or share it with a friend, please visit our website, anotherviewradio.org, and download the podcast. And don't forget to sign up for our eView newsletter. It's a once-a-week reminder of upcoming shows. Next week, guess what? I get to take a vacation. I'm so excited. But no worries. Producer Lisa Godley will be in the host chair along with the Another View Roundtable. Our theme music was created and performed especially for Another View by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Todd Washburn is our audio engineer, and Dr. Barry Graham answered our phones. Vaccinate.virginia.gov is the website to register for your vaccine. Please continue to wear your mask, stay 6 feet apart in public, and wash your hands. And be sure to join us again next Thursday at noon for Another View.
Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, carrying out your charitable wishes forever, whether it's helping shelter animals, feeding the homeless, enhancing the arts, or supporting students. Learn more at leaveabequest.org.